Paul Finebaum Show is presented by Johnsonville.
And we're back, second half of the show, live from Knoxville. Yeah, that's smoky there. But it was also pretty incredible because things were different down back then from this regard. You really had the opportunity to talk to people. The access was almost unlimited. As the school sports editor, I hope this is still the same. We traveled with the team. In football, it was a lot bigger, but in basketball, I would literally sit in the back of the plane with Bernard King or Ernie Grunfeld, who was the two big stars at the time. And you got to know everybody. I learned as a reporter, you begin to develop the art of interviewing when you're sitting there one-on-one with people. And I'm not about to say it was better then, because I think the technological changes have been just fantastic, and it's so there's so much more available. But I would be sitting here researching something, and don't laugh. I would have to stop and go either across campus to the undergraduate library, or for something like look up an older story. I'd go to the graduate library and literally get a Sports Illustrated out, or there was no Google. I mean, there was no means of getting information, which I think is so much more beneficial today. But it was a laborious process to do a story. Probably the most memorable was the firing of a coach. By the way, I had a lot of experience at that since, and so have all of you. But so Bill Battle was the coach as I started working here, and I think, and I've got to know Bill later, and he agrees. I think he was what I would call the first major head coach in the country to be on the hot seat. His last 2 years were quite extraordinary. I mean, somebody sent a moving van to his house, which made big news, and it put him on the hot seat. And then he ultimately got fired. He was the youngest head coach in the country when he took over. He beat Alabama's first year. I mean, he really had it going, and then it fell apart at the end. So that was a really interesting story, watching him get fired. And then the wooing of Johnny Majors. Johnny Majors had been here in the mid-'50s. He came in second in the Heisman Trophy. One of them until Peyton Manning showed up. He was the most famous player in school history, and he had been passed over previously, so there was a little bit of uneasiness. His brothers had played here. His father was a coach at Swanee, and nobody really knew whether he would take the job. So that became, as Battle was on his way out, can Johnny Majors come home? So it was a big deal. And when he accepted the job, it was literally a celebration. Considering the coaching changes in the last 10 years, it's kind of hard to compare it to anything that I've really seen. But it was a major deal. So that was probably the biggest story I covered. But Tennessee was good in anything. I remember Tennessee won the national championship in swimming. The basketball program was quite good. But my favorite memories here, interestingly, were getting to know and covering Pat Summitt, because she had just started. She was a couple of years older than I was, and she was still playing. She had played on the Olympic team while she was the head coach here. So she was. You knew at that moment that Pat was going to be something. Nobody could have predicted she'd end up, being one of the greatest coaches, period, in any of all time. But she was truly. I remember walking one day. We got it on the teletype from the AP that the Lady Vols had been selected. Had finished first in the AP poll. So that's a big story. I left the Beacon office, ran over to Stokely Athletic Center at the time, and she had an office that, here was the door, and her office ended where that TV is, and I knocked on the door, and she yanked it open, and I'm like going, oh my God. She Yeah. I mean, I don't know if any of you ever had the opportunity, but she could be very intimidating. And she said, I started to stutter. I was like, you don't interrupt Coach Summit. I said, Coach, I hate to interrupt you. And she still hadn't said a word other than, yeah. I said, but I need to do a story on you. And she stared me. I said, because the AP has just come out, and the Vols, or Lady Vols, are #1 in the country. And all of a sudden, she broke into a smile. Now, I mean, the idea that she wouldn't have known that, but I mean, we got it at 1 o'clock, and I was over at our office at 5 after 1. There was the communication world was so much different. But that was one of the scariest moments of my life, trying to break really good news to Coach Summit. But so, yeah, I mean, when I think back on those times, I think of her probably more than anyone else. I really don't know. The experience I got in this office is incalculable, because you just can't get that at a real profession, at a real newspaper or a real broadcast entity coming out of college.